16-11. Jenna Bowleg on the backside there looking for the passes. Number 1 brings it back to the mid-pitch. Crowd getting a little frustrated with the slow pace of the game here. They're really taking control of the pace. Both of these teams know that holding on to the quaffle is going to cut down from any sort of defensive slip-ups and really focus on the snitch play.
One problem that Quadball has tried to tackle over the years is how to keep teams from stalling play. Slow ball does not make for an exciting game after all. Nope. It sure doesn't. To encourage teams to actually shoot the quaffle, various delay of game rules have been introduced. Well, guidelines actually. What constitutes delay of game is left largely to the discretion of the referee. Perhaps we can learn from the other sport that uses hoops and introduce a shot clock into quadball. This would eliminate the need for most delay of game rules and make things more consistent. Now you may be wondering how you're supposed to find people to keep track of shot clock time. As it turns out, that's not the main problem. The main problem is the clock itself. A quick search online shows that they ain't cheap. They may be perfect for other sports, but for quadball, well, if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. But if they're actually brave enough to tell you the price, you'll find that you can easily spend $5 or more on a system. Given that most quadball tournaments are played on multiple pitches, that can add up pretty fast. Then there's a little matter of actually lugging them to your venue. Most football play clocks are sized in the 4-foot range and can weigh between 60 and 140 pounds. Yeah, you'll have a hard time getting those in your car. And those bright LED displays need power and lots of it. Many need AC power. Good luck finding an outlet in the middle of a field. No, that's not what they mean by power plant. And if you can find a play clock that actually runs on batteries, they'll each need a big, heavy 1300 watt-hour deep cycle battery. And you have to power 2 clocks on each pitch. To be useful in quadball, shot clocks need to be small and light enough to transport, while being large enough to read from midfield. The clocks must be visible in bright sunlight while consuming so little power they can easily run all day on reasonably sized batteries. They need to be simple to build with easily sourced materials. They have to be durable, weather resistant, reliable, and most of all, affordable. Players will not be staring at the clock during play. Therefore, the clocks need to give players an audible cue that time is about to expire. Finally, given that we're in the early days of using shot clocks in quadball, clock duration needs to be settable without having to dig into the software. Are we asking the moon? Is this an impossible task? No! We at 3 Idiots in a Van Industries have the solution to all of your shot clock woes. Introducing the QuadTime Mark IV, the state-of-the-art in quadball shot clock technology. 2 QuadTime Mark IV displays and their associated controller, the Quad Control Mark II, form a complete delay of game prevention solution. The QuadTime Mark IV is not really that impressive. Heck, they're only prototypes, but hey, they'll get the job done. And in keeping with Quadball's DIY equipment tradition, you can build your own. Now this is not a step-by-step how-to guide, only a starting point. Doubtless you can improve on our design. As mentioned, our system consists of 2 clock displays and 1 controller. The displays are connected to the controller via inexpensive Cat5 cables. We chose not to go wireless to make the system more reliable. Radio can be spotty at the best of times. Besides, we wouldn't want a wireless controller on one pitch to interfere with clocks on another. The clocks themselves are mechanically very simple, consisting of a 15-inch bicolored disc attached directly to a common hobby servo motor. With the front mask in place, you get a curved progress bar-like display. A bright yellow against black color scheme makes the display highly visible. The controller is very straightforward. One button resets the clock while another starts and stops it. A pair of LEDs indicate whether the clock is running or stopped. A third button sounds the buzzer. Finally, there are buttons that move the clock up or down by 1 second in case you have to add or subtract time on the clock. There are a few things to consider when building your clocks. For example, what would you do if debris got stuck under the mask and interfered with the clock's motion? Well, if you were to mount the mask on hinges, you could clean your clock quite easily. You also have to keep in mind that the clocks will be operated in rain, sleet, snow, and gloom of night, so think about how water can get into the works. For example, if you make your joins like this, then water may seep through. But if built like this, then water will more likely flow around the join. Also, having all switches and connectors facing downwards under a cover will help keep the electronics dry while still allowing access. If building out of wood, you might consider painting it with something like polyurethane to seal out water. Another option would be to build out of plastic. Don't forget to waterproof the speaker for the buzzer. Paper does not do well in the rain. You'll also want to make some provision for weighing down your clocks. You wouldn't want them blowing over in a stiff breeze after all. Yep, found that out the hard way. Sizing your clocks is another consideration. While the advantages of a larger display are obvious, there are downsides to going bigger than you need to. A larger clock needs a larger disc, which requires a beefier servo motor to move. This adds to the cost. A larger clock also requires more material, which not only adds more to the cost, but adds weight. The added weight and added size makes a larger clock more difficult to transport. We think the 15-inch disc in the Quad Clock Mark IV is a good compromise. Hopefully, field testing will bear this out. Now we get into the really nerdy stuff. We'll start with the electrical guts of the controller. We chose the Arduino Uno to be the brain of the controller because of its popularity with beginners. All buttons, switches, and LEDs connect to it. Also connected is a serial to RS422 converter that takes data from the Arduino and turns it into a signal that can be sent down 200-odd feet of cable to the clocks. A pair of RJ45 jacks, normally used for Ethernet, provide the connections. The clocks themselves have a few more parts. Like the controller, each clock contains an Arduino Uno, RS422 converter, dip switches, and RJ45 jack. But the clock's circuit must also drive a speaker and servo motor. To power the servo, we included a DC-DC converter. This brings the 7 to 12 volts that powers the rest of the circuit down to the 6 volts that the servo can handle. Naturally, you'll need to make sure the output of the DC-DC converter is actually 6 volts. With the converter we happen to be using, this can be done by adjusting a trim pot while reading the output on a voltmeter. When choosing a servo, make sure it can provide enough torque to move the disc without struggling. For a 15-inch disc made out of a plastic for sale sign, we found that a servo with a torque of 3.7 kilograms-centimeters will do the job. Some servos can move faster than others. You want the motor to respond quickly to commands. 60 degrees in 0.15 seconds is pretty snappy. 0.23 seconds is a tad sluggish, but fast enough. Multi-turn servos, on the other hand, are way too slow. They'd be halfway down the pitch before the clock reset. You also want to consider the servo's maximum rotation angle. Many servos can do 180 degrees. Some can do more, say 200 or so. But you'll want to test the servo that you get. Some spec sheets can be in error. This is important when cutting the window in the mask. The angle you cut has to be less than the maximum rotation angle of the servo. It can't be greater than 180 degrees, but it may need to be less, say 160. Now for the buzzer. While the speaker can be driven by the Arduino directly, a power amp module makes the buzzer loud enough for players to hear. Just be sure it's not so loud that it interferes with play on another pitch. Our prototype has a jumper that makes bypassing the power amp easy when less volume is needed, say while testing. As a side note, the power amp module we happen to be using does have a volume control. However, given the high output of the Arduino, the volume control acts more like an on-off switch. It's best to set the control to the lowest setting that gives you full volume. Otherwise, the noise of the circuit will become audible. Of course, you could add a volume control between the Arduino and the power amp, should that prove necessary. Field testing will tell. We'll leave that as an exercise. The Arduino is just a brick without the software to run on it, known as a sketch in Arduino IDE. You could download our sketches from our GitHub site. You can also find our schematics there, link in the description. Once you've downloaded the sketches, now what? Well, you'll have to load them onto the Arduinos. To do that, you'll need to download the Arduino IDE. We recommend sticking with version 1. Version 2 ain't ready for prime time. That link is also in the description. Or you could just search for Arduino IDE 1 in your favorite search engine, and you should have no trouble finding their download site. Now we're just going to show you the basics of uploading a sketch to an Arduino. This should be enough to get your shot clocks and controller up and running. If you want to dig deeper, there's plenty of information online that will tell you anything you want to know. To program the Arduino, connect it to your computer with a standard USB cable. If you're about to upload to one of the clocks, first disconnect the serial port by sliding this dip switch to the program position. That way, it won't interfere with the USB port. Next, open the IDE. Once it's running, we could load our sketch. Go to File, then select Open. Now be sure to load the correct sketch. Sending the shot clock controller sketch to the clock will not work. You should now see the source code come up in the edit window. Once the sketch is loaded, go to the Tools menu and select Board Arduino Uno. Once done, go back to the Tools menu. This time, go to Port and select the COM port corresponding to the Arduino that's plugged in. All that's left to do now is to upload the sketch. Just click the Upload button and Bob's your uncle. Oh, and once done uploading to one of the clocks, don't forget to reset the dip switch back to the run position. The clock will not be able to receive commands from the controller otherwise. Once you've built your system, there are a few setup procedures that must be done before using it for the first time. First things first, we want our clocks to move clockwise. If your clock is moving the wrong way, power it off, then flip the direction dip switch to the opposite position. Once powered back up, it should move in the correct direction. Now set the shot clock duration. Simply enter it via the duration dip switch, in binary. Now calm down. It ain't that hard. The easiest way to convert shot clock time in decimal to shot clock time in binary is to let the Windows calculator do it for you. Just open the calculator, go to the View menu, and select Programmer Mode. Click the decimal radio button, then enter the shot clock time in seconds. Now press the binary button. You'll now see the shot clock time displayed in binary. You can use this binary representation to set the dip switches. Starting from the right and moving left, flip each switch on for a 1 and off for a 0. Again, be sure that both clocks and the controller are set identically. You'll only have to do this once, unless there's a rule change. Finally, we have to tell the electronics what servo position corresponds to the maximum and minimum times on the clock. To do this, connect the clock you want to calibrate, and only that clock. Next, set the controller to calibrate mode. The buttons on the controller now have alternate functions, and both LEDs will light. We'll start by calibrating the minimum time. Press the Go to Min button. The clock's indicator will move to the position that it thinks is time equals 0. In this case, it reads too high. Using the up and down buttons, move the indicator until the last of the yellow disappears from the mask window. The display should now be all black, with no yellow showing at all, but only just. Once you're satisfied, press and hold the store button while pressing the down button. The connected clock will now remember where time equals 0 is. Now press the Go to Max button. The indicator moves to where it thinks the maximum clock time is. In this case, it reads too low. Again, using the up and down buttons, move the indicator to a position where all the black disappears and nothing but yellow shows. Once the indicator is in the correct position, hold the store button while pressing up. Verify that the minimum and maximum indicator positions are correct. Tweak is needed. When done, switch the controller back to game mode. Now disconnect the first clock and connect the second. Repeat the calibration procedure with the second clock. And there you have it. We hope this has sparked some ideas for building your own shot clocks. Suppose you don't have access to the Windows calculator. How do you convert shot clock duration to binary then? Easy. Here's how. First, make a table with 8 columns and 3 rows. In the top row, label each column from 1 to 8 as shown. This represents the numbered position on the dip switch. The middle row represents the place values in base 2. Label column 8 1, column 7 2, column 6 4, and so on, doubling for each place value. Let's say we want a shot clock time of 45 seconds. We'll fill in the bottom row of the table with 1s and 0s starting at column 1, which happens to be the 128th place. Is 45 greater than or equal to 128? No? Then write a 0 in the 128th column. Move on to the next column. Is 45 greater than or equal to 64? No? Write a 0 in that place as well. 45 greater than or equal to 32? Yes. Write a 1 in the 32's column. Now subtract 32 from 45. We're left with 13. On to the next column. Is 13 greater than or equal to 16? No, it isn't. 0 goes in that column. Is 13 greater than or equal to 8? Yup. Write a 1 in that column, then subtract 8 from 13. We're left with 5. Moving on. 5 greater than or equal to 4? Put a 1 in that column, subtract 4 from 5, and we're left with 1. 1 greater than or equal to 2? No, 0 goes in that column. 1 greater than or equal to 1? Yes, it is. Write 1 in the last column, subtract 1 from 1, and we've run out of seconds to convert. Now you have the shot clock duration represented in binary form, which you can use to set the duration dip switches on the clocks and the controller. Easy peasy.